Behind the legendary harmonies and chart-topping hits lies a bizarre tale of cult disappearances, stolen toilet parts, drug-induced holes in noses, and guitarists smashing their heads against walls until they bleed. From Jeremy Spencer vanishing mid-tour to join a religious cult to Stevie Nicks demanding pink hotel rooms with white pianos, Fleetwood Mac's story reads like fiction but is stranger than any rumor. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Fleetwood Mac. Fact 1. Guitarist vanished mid-tour to join cult. On February 15, 1971, Jeremy Spencer left his hotel room in Los Angeles to buy a magazine from a bookstore on Hollywood Boulevard and simply never came back. The Fleetwood Mac guitarist had vanished without a trace just hours before the band was scheduled to perform at the legendary Whiskey A Go-Go, forcing them to cancel the show and launch a frantic search that would last for days. Spencer had been one of Fleetwood Mac's founding members since 1967, known for his slide guitar skills and his spot-on impersonations of 1950s rock and roll stars like Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly. He was also the band's most unpredictable member, but nothing had prepared his bandmates for what happened next. When Spencer failed to return to the hotel, the other members contacted the police and even hired private investigators to track him down. After 5 agonizing days of searching, the band finally discovered Spencer's whereabouts through a tip that led them to a 4-story warehouse in downtown Los Angeles. There, they found him living with a religious group called the Children of God, his long hair cut short and wearing tattered clothes instead of his usual stage attire. The most shocking part was that Spencer had given away his $200 to the commune and declared that he would not be returning to the band. When Mick Fleetwood and the band's road manager finally confronted Spencer, he calmly told them that he had renounced his previous life, including his wife and 2 children back in London, saying that Jesus would take care of them. According to witnesses, about 100 members of the group surrounded Spencer during the conversation, with one person repeatedly touching him and calling him a little god. The band members described Spencer as appearing hypnotized and completely transformed from the person they had known for years. Spencer later explained that he had been approached on the street by a member of the Children of God named Apollos, who engaged him in a conversation about religion and invited him to visit their nearby mission. Despite widespread rumors that he had been kidnapped or brainwashed, Spencer always maintained that he joined the group voluntarily after becoming disillusioned with the rock and roll lifestyle. He remained with the organization, which later became known as the Family International, for the rest of his life, occasionally releasing religious music but never returning to mainstream rock. Fact 2. Cocaine burned a hole through Stevie's nose. Stevie Nicks' cocaine habit during the 1970s and 80s was so severe that it literally burned a hole through the cartilage in her nose, and she has deliberately chosen never to have it surgically repaired because she fears it might change her distinctive singing voice. The hole, which Nicks has described as being the size of a dime, became so large that her doctor warned her that her next line of cocaine could potentially kill her by going straight to her brain. During Fleetwood Mac's peak years, particularly while recording and touring behind the massive success of Rumors, Nicks estimates she spent close to $1 million on cocaine alone. The drug use was so extensive throughout the band that they reportedly considered thanking their drug dealer in the album credits. And Nicks has openly admitted that at one point she was the worst addict among a group where everyone was using heavily. She wore a small gold and turquoise bottle filled with cocaine around her neck, so she would never be without the drug, and the constant snorting eventually caused severe physical damage to her nasal passages. When a plastic surgeon examined the hole in her septum, he told Nicks that it could be easily repaired with a small surgical procedure. However, she made the conscious decision to leave it alone after learning that fixing the hole might alter the way air flows through her nose and potentially change the sound of her voice. Since her distinctive raspy vocal tone is such an integral part of her musical identity, Nicks felt the risk was too great to take. The singer has been remarkably candid about the extent of her drug problem, explaining that she was fragile and doing dangerous amounts of cocaine while also consuming brandy, champagne, and maintaining a heavy cigarette habit. Her friend Tom Petty was so worried about her condition that he later said he wouldn't have been surprised to receive a phone call saying she had died. In 1986, Nicks finally checked herself into the Betty Ford Clinic to get clean. But the hole in her nose remains as a permanent reminder of those dark years, and she continues to refuse surgical repair to protect the voice that made her famous. Fact 3. Mick's balls were stolen toilet chains. The pair of wooden balls prominently dangling between Mick Fleetwood's legs on the iconic Rumours album cover are actually toilet chains that the drummer drunkenly stole from a venue bathroom during Fleetwood Mac's early club days in the late 1960s. What might look like a bizarre fashion statement or artistic choice was really the result of a night of drinking and destructive behavior that accidentally became one of rock's most recognizable accessories. Fleetwood has openly admitted to the theft, explaining that after having a couple of glasses of English ale before a show, he emerged from the toilet with the chains after literally ripping them off the wall. In those days, older British toilets had their water tanks mounted high above the bowl and required long chains with wooden balls at the end for users to reach up and pull to flush. Fleetwood found himself drawn to these particular chains and, in his own words, was feeling very destructive that night. The drummer began wearing the stolen toilet chains hanging from his belt during performances, and they quickly became his signature look and good luck charm. Fleetwood felt the chains were an appropriate nod to his blues roots, since much of blues music contains sexually suggestive themes, and the placement of the dangling wooden balls certainly fit that tradition. The chains became so much a part of his stage persona that he refused to perform Fleetwood Mac shows without them. Unfortunately, the original stolen chains were lost during a tour, but Fleetwood cared so much about maintaining his lucky talisman that he hired a carpenter to create an exact replica set. He continued wearing these replacement chains for decades, and they made their most famous appearance in the 1977 photo shoot for the Rumours album cover, where photographer Herbert Worthington captured Fleetwood in his characteristic pose with the wooden balls clearly visible. In a remarkable twist of fate, when items from Fleetwood's personal collection went up for auction in December 2022, the famous toilet chain balls sold for an astounding $128,000, proving that even stolen bathroom fixtures can become priceless rock memorabilia when they're part of music history. Fact 4. Peter Green threatened his accountant with a shotgun. In 1977, Fleetwood Mac founder Peter Green walked into his accountant's office carrying a shotgun and furiously demanded that the man stop sending him royalty checks, threatening him at gunpoint until police were called and Green was arrested. This bizarre incident was the culmination of Green's complete mental breakdown that had been building for years following a catastrophic LSD experience at a German commune in 1970. Green had founded Fleetwood Mac in 1967 and was widely regarded as one of Britain's greatest blues guitarists, but his heavy use of LSD during the band's rise to fame had profoundly damaged his mental state. After taking what he described as very bad, impure acid at a hippie commune near Munich, Green became obsessed with the idea that money was evil and began giving away his wealth to various charities. He tried to convince his bandmates to donate all of their earnings as well, and when they refused, he quit the band in 1970. By the mid-70s, Green had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and was spending most of his time sleeping up to 20 hours a day, having given away his money and even donated his guitars to local charity shops. However, as Fleetwood Mac's popularity exploded with their new lineup featuring Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, Green was still entitled to royalties from the songs he had written during his time with the band, and these payments were being handled by his accountant, David Simmons. When Simmons contacted Green about receiving these royalty checks, Green became enraged and stormed into the accountant's office with a shotgun he had smuggled back from Canada. He furiously demanded that Simmons never send him any money again and insisted that all future royalties be given away to charity instead. The terrified accountant immediately called the police, and Green was arrested on the spot. Green later said he was actually quite happy in prison and thought he would be fine there. but authorities determined he had failed a psychiatric evaluation and committed him to a mental institution instead. He spent much of the 70s and 80s in and out of psychiatric hospitals, receiving electroconvulsive therapy and various medications, while the band he had founded went on to become one of the biggest acts in the world. Fact 5. Guitarist Bob Weston was fired for sleeping with Mick's wife. Bob Weston was abruptly fired from Fleetwood Mac in October 1973 after drummer Mick Fleetwood discovered that the guitarist was having a secret affair with his wife Jenny Boyd during their American tour, leading to the immediate cancellation of the remaining dates and nearly destroying the band entirely. Weston had joined Fleetwood Mac in 1972 as a replacement for Danny Kirwan and had quickly become an integral part of the group, contributing solid guitar work to their albums Penguin and Mystery to Me. Jenny Boyd, who was a 1960s London model and the sister of Pattie Boyd, had married Fleetwood in 1970 and was traveling with the band during their 1973 tour of the United States. The tour had been going exceptionally well, with the band finally starting to gel as a live act and gaining momentum in America, but everything fell apart when Fleetwood discovered the relationship between his wife and his guitarist. According to Mick Fleetwood's own account, he had initially gotten along very well with Weston and tried to continue working with him despite the personal betrayal, mainly because canceling the tour would result in massive financial and legal penalties for the band. However, after struggling through several more shows while dealing with the emotional turmoil, Fleetwood finally reached his breaking point after a performance in Lincoln, Nebraska, and told the rest of the band that he could no longer work with Weston. The other band members collectively agreed that Weston had to go, and rather than confronting him directly, they had the tour manager deliver the news that he was being dismissed from the group. The remaining tour dates were immediately canceled, and the band members scattered to different parts of the world to recover from the chaos. Weston later reflected on the incident with dark humor, calling it the most expensive affair he had ever had in his life, because it cost him his career with one of Britain's most promising rock bands. The guitarist's departure also contributed to Bob Welch's growing disenchantment with life in Fleetwood Mac, and when Welch eventually left in 1974, it paved the way for Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks to join the band and transform them into global superstars. Fact 6. Danny Kirwan smashed his head against a wall. Danny Kirwan suffered a complete mental breakdown just minutes before a Fleetwood Mac concert in 1972, violently smashing his head and fists against the dressing room wall until blood poured down his face, then destroying his precious Gibson Les Paul guitar and refusing to take the stage. The 22-year-old guitarist had been struggling with alcoholism and the pressures of fame for months, but this explosive incident marked the shocking end of his career with the band. The breakdown occurred backstage during Fleetwood Mac's American tour to promote their Bare Trees album, when Kirwan got into an argument with fellow guitarist Bob Welch over the simple process of tuning their guitars before the show. According to Mick Fleetwood, who witnessed the entire incident, Kirwan was acting strangely about tuning his guitar and suddenly went off on a rant about Welch never being properly in tune. Without warning, Kirwan flew into a violent rage and began banging his head against the concrete wall with such force that he splattered blood everywhere, leaving the other band members paralyzed in complete shock. Fleetwood later described never having seen Kirwan do anything so violent in all the years he had known him, and the guitarist's behavior was completely out of character for someone who was normally quiet and sensitive. After bloodying himself against the wall, Kirwan grabbed his beautiful vintage Les Paul Black Beauty guitar and smashed it to pieces, then proceeded to demolish everything else in the dressing room that he could throw or overturn. When there was nothing left to destroy, he calmed down but flatly refused to go on stage, telling his bandmates he would not perform while the audience could be heard chanting for the band outside. Fleetwood Mac was forced to struggle through the entire concert without their lead guitarist, with Welch desperately trying to cover Kirwan's guitar parts and vocal harmonies, while the arrangements fell apart around them. After the show, Kirwan offered unwelcome criticism of their performance from the mixing desk, where he had watched them struggle. The other band members held a conference back at the hotel that night and collectively decided that Kirwan had to be dismissed immediately, with Fleetwood delivering the news as the only member who was still speaking to him. Fact 7. Stevie demanded pink hotel rooms and white pianos. During Fleetwood Mac's elaborate Tusk tour in 1979 and 1980, Stevie Nicks made the extraordinary demand that every single hotel room she stayed in be completely repainted pink before her arrival, and furnished with a white grand piano, despite the fact that she could not actually play the instrument. This over-the-top requirement was just one part of the band's extravagant tour rider that also included personal masseuses, individual makeup crews, and black belt karate experts as bodyguards for each member. The Tusk tour followed the massive commercial success of Rumors, which had stayed at #1 on the Billboard charts for 31 weeks and made Fleetwood Mac one of the biggest bands in the world. With their newfound superstar status and virtually unlimited budget, the band members were able to make increasingly elaborate demands that would have been impossible during their earlier, less successful years. Nicks' pink room and piano requirements meant that hotel staff had to work around the clock to completely redecorate her accommodations before she arrived in each city, often requiring professional painters to work through the night to transform ordinary hotel rooms into her preferred pink paradise. The white grand pianos had to be specially rented and moved into the rooms, which was both logistically challenging and extremely expensive given that these instruments are massive, heavy, and require professional movers and tuning. The irony of the piano demand was that Nicks readily admitted she could not play the instrument, but she apparently enjoyed having Christine McVie come to her room to play for her instead. McVie, who was the band's accomplished keyboard player, found the arrangement amusing and never seemed to mind being called upon to provide private piano performances in Nicks's specially decorated pink hotel rooms. Mick Fleetwood later described Nicks as having an almost comedic need for what he called hotel hopping, where the entire band would check into a hotel only for Nicks to decide she needed to try a different one and check out immediately. This habit, combined with her elaborate room requirements, led Fleetwood to joke that she should become a professional hotel critic, given her extremely particular standards for accommodations during their tours. Fact 8. Dreams was written in Sly Stone's bed. Stevie Nicks wrote Dreams, which became Fleetwood Mac's only #1 hit in the United States, while sitting on a large black velvet bed in an unused recording studio at the record plant in Sausalito, California, that had been specially built for funk legend Sly Stone of Sly and the Family Stone. The song that would go on to define Fleetwood Mac's career was created in this unusual setting during the tense and emotionally charged recording sessions for the Rumors album in early 1976. During the lengthy recording process at the record plant, Nicks often found herself with nothing to do while the other band members worked on their parts in the main studio, and the constant tension between her and her ex-boyfriend Lindsey Buckingham made it difficult for her to stay in the same room with him for extended periods. To escape the uncomfortable atmosphere and find some creative space, she would often wander down the hall to explore other unused studios in the complex. The studio that belonged to Sly Stone was described by Nicks as a dramatic black and red room with a sunken pit in the middle where a piano was positioned, and it featured the large black velvet bed with ornate Victorian drapes that caught her attention. One day, when she wasn't needed in the main recording room, Nicks took a Fender Rhodes electric piano into Sly Stone's studio and sat down on the bed with the keyboard positioned in front of her. The intimate and somewhat mysterious atmosphere of the room, combined with her emotional state during the breakup with Buckingham and the ongoing drama within the band, inspired her to write the haunting lyrics and melody that would become Dreams. She later described the experience as being surrounded by this theatrical, almost gothic environment while she worked out the song's distinctive chord progression and wrote the lyrics about the pain of relationships falling apart. When Nicks brought the rough version of Dreams to the rest of the band the following day, Christine McVie initially thought it was boring because it only had 3 chords and 1 note in the left hand. But Lindsey Buckingham transformed her simple piano demo into the hypnotic, layered arrangement that became the final recording and Fleetwood Mac's biggest commercial success. Fact 9. They almost thanked their drug dealer in album credits. Fleetwood Mac's cocaine consumption during the recording of Rumors was so extensive that the band seriously considered thanking their drug dealer in the album's liner notes, but they were prevented from doing so when the dealer was killed in a gangland execution before the album was completed. This shocking detail was revealed by Mick Fleetwood himself in his 1990 memoir, Fleetwood: My Life and Adventures. In Fleetwood Mac, where he openly discussed the band's heavy drug use during what would become one of the best-selling albums of all time. The recording sessions for Rumors took place over 11 grueling months in 1976 and 1977, during which the band members were not only dealing with multiple relationship breakups within the group, but also consuming massive quantities of cocaine to cope with the emotional stress and maintain their energy for the long studio hours. The drug use was so pervasive that it became an integral part of the creative process, with band members regularly doing lines of cocaine to get through the intense recording sessions and personal confrontations. According to Fleetwood's account, the band had developed such a close relationship with their cocaine supplier that they genuinely felt he deserved recognition for his role in helping them complete the album, even if that role was providing illegal drugs rather than musical contributions. The idea of crediting their dealer in the album's acknowledgments was apparently discussed seriously enough among the band members that it wasn't just a casual joke or passing comment. The dealer's violent death, which Fleetwood described as a gangland-style execution, occurred before Rumors was finished and released in February 1977, ultimately preventing the band from following through on their bizarre plan to publicly thank him. Fleetwood later noted that the dealer's murder was probably the only reason his name didn't appear in the album credits, suggesting that the band would have actually gone ahead with crediting him if he had lived to see the album's completion. Ironically, Fleetwood also revealed that the band's cocaine consumption was even heavier during the recording of their 1987 album Tango in the Night than it had been during the Rumors sessions, indicating that their drug use continued to escalate even after achieving massive commercial success. Fact 10. Christine lied about "You Make Loving Fun." Christine McVie told her husband and bandmate John McVie that her upbeat song, "You Make Loving Fun" from the Rumors album, was written about her dog in order to hide the fact that it was actually a celebration of her secret affair with the band's lighting director, Curry Grant. This elaborate deception was Christine's way of avoiding an extremely awkward situation, since she would have to perform the love song night after night on stage while standing next to her estranged husband, who was also the bass player in the band. At the time Christine wrote the song in 1976, she and John McVie were in the middle of divorce proceedings after 8 years of marriage, but they were still technically married and had to continue working together professionally during the emotionally charged Rumors recording sessions. While the couple had stopped talking to each other socially and only discussed musical matters, Christine was simultaneously carrying on a romantic relationship with Grant, who traveled with the band as part of their technical crew. The song's lyrics, which include lines about feeling sweet and wonderful emotions because of someone special, were clearly inspired by Christine's feelings for her new lover rather than any pet. The funky groove and playful melody of "You Make Loving Fun" stood out from the rest of the darker, more emotionally heavy material on Rumors, reflecting Christine's happiness about finding love again during an otherwise turbulent period for the band. Christine's dog story was apparently convincing enough to avoid immediate suspicion from John, or perhaps he simply chose not to question it too closely, given that their marriage was already over and everyone in the band was dealing with their own relationship drama. The affair with Curry Grant was just one of many romantic entanglements happening within and around Fleetwood Mac during this period, as band members and crew members were constantly switching partners and creating new complications. The deception worked so well that "You Make Loving Fun" became one of the most popular tracks on Rumors, reaching number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in 1977, while John McVie remained unaware that he was helping to perform a song celebrating his wife's affair with another man every night on their hugely successful tour. Fact 11. The classic lineup was actually their 10th version. The lineup that most people consider the classic Fleetwood Mac, featuring Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, Christine McVie, John McVie, and Mick Fleetwood, was actually the 10th different incarnation of the band since its formation in 1967, highlighting just how dramatically the group had changed over the years before achieving their greatest success. This remarkable fact demonstrates that Fleetwood Mac went through an extraordinary number of personnel changes and musical transformations before finally settling on the combination of musicians that would create rumors and become one of the best-selling bands of all time. The band was originally founded by guitarist Peter Green, who named it after drummer Mick Fleetwood and bassist John McVie. But the revolving door of members began almost immediately as various guitarists, singers, and other musicians joined and left for reasons ranging from mental health issues to religious conversions to simple creative differences. The early lineups included blues guitarists like Jeremy Spencer and Danny Kirwan, both of whom left the band under dramatic circumstances, followed by other musicians like Bob Weston and Bob Welch, who each contributed to different eras of the band's evolution. By the time Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks joined as a package deal in December 1974, Fleetwood Mac had already been through 9 different configurations, with only Mick Fleetwood and John McVie remaining as constant members throughout all the changes. Christine McVie had joined in 1970, initially as a session musician before becoming a full member, but even she had not been present for the band's earliest incarnations. The addition of Buckingham and Nicks marked a dramatic shift away from Fleetwood Mac's blues rock roots toward a more pop-oriented sound that would prove to be commercially successful beyond anyone's expectations. What makes this 10th lineup particularly remarkable is that it became the most stable and longest-lasting version of the band, producing 5 studio albums between 1975 and 1987, including their massive breakthrough with Rumors. The fact that this classic lineup was actually the result of nearly a decade of constant experimentation and member changes makes their eventual success even more impressive, proving that sometimes it takes many attempts to find the right combination of personalities and talents to create musical magic. Fact 12. Lindsey's guitar was restrung every 20 minutes. During the recording of Never Going Back Again for the Rumors album, Lindsey Buckingham's guitar strings were changed every 20 minutes in an obsessive pursuit of sonic perfection that exemplified Fleetwood Mac's legendary attention to detail during their most important recording sessions. This extreme level of precision was part of the band's relentless quest to create the perfect sound for each track, regardless of how much time, money, or effort it required. The song Never Going Back Again features Buckingham's intricate finger-picking guitar work that creates a delicate, shimmering texture throughout the track, and achieving the exact tone he wanted required maintaining the absolute freshness of the guitar strings at all times. Guitar strings naturally lose their brightness and clarity as they are played, with brand new strings producing the most crisp and vibrant sound that gradually dulls over time as the metal oxidizes and stretches from use. Buckingham was so particular about capturing the precise sound he had in mind that he insisted on having completely fresh strings installed on his guitar every 20 minutes during the recording process, ensuring that each take would have the same brilliant, ringing quality that only brand new strings can provide. This meant that studio technicians had to constantly restring his guitar throughout the recording sessions, which was both time-consuming and expensive, given that professional guitar strings are not cheap, and the process requires careful tuning and adjustment each time. The extreme restringing schedule was just one example of the perfectionist approach that characterized the entire Rumors recording process, where the band spared no expense or effort to achieve their artistic vision. Other legendary examples of their pursuit of perfection included requiring 4 days, 9 different pianos, and 3 separate tuners just to find a suitable instrument for Christine McVie to play on the album. This obsessive attention to detail, while costly and time-consuming, ultimately contributed to the album's incredible sound quality and commercial success, as Never Going Back Again became one of the standout tracks on Rumors with its distinctive guitar work that still sounds fresh and vibrant nearly 50 years after it was recorded with those constantly replaced strings. Fact 13. Songbird was recorded in an empty auditorium. Christine McVie's haunting ballad Songbird was recorded late at night in a completely empty concert auditorium rather than in a traditional recording studio, creating the intimate and vulnerable atmosphere that makes the song one of Fleetwood Mac's most emotionally powerful tracks. The decision to record in this unusual location was made specifically to capture the raw, isolated emotion that Christine wanted to convey in what would become one of her most beloved compositions. The recording took place during the Rumors sessions, when the band was experimenting with different locations and techniques to achieve the perfect sound for each song, and Christine felt that the stripped-down arrangement of Songbird required a special environment that a regular studio couldn't provide. The song features just Christine's voice and piano, with no other instruments or embellishments, making the choice of recording location crucial to achieving the right emotional impact. The empty auditorium provided a natural reverb and acoustic space that gave Christine's voice and piano a sense of space and loneliness that perfectly matched the song's themes of love, gratitude, and hope. Recording late at night ensured that there would be no outside noise or distractions, allowing Christine to pour her emotions into the performance in complete solitude, with only the recording equipment and engineers present to capture the moment. The intimate setting allowed Christine to sing and play with complete vulnerability, knowing that she was alone in this vast, dark space, with only her music echoing through the empty seats. This created a sense of performing for ghosts or memories rather than a live audience, which added to the ethereal quality that makes Songbird such a moving listening experience. The unusual recording approach proved to be inspired, as Songbird became one of the most enduring and beloved songs in Fleetwood Mac's catalog, often interpreted as a message of gratitude and hope, both for the band and its audience. The song's timeless quality and emotional resonance can be directly traced back to Christine's decision to record it in that empty auditorium, where the natural acoustics and isolated atmosphere captured something that could never have been achieved in a conventional studio setting. Fact 14. They used unconventional percussion instruments. While experimenting with different sounds for Secondhand News, the opening track of the Rumors album, Lindsey Buckingham used his studio chair as an unconventional percussion instrument, literally smacking the seat in time with the beat to create the song's distinctive folksy rhythm. This do-it-yourself approach to instrumentation was typical of Buckingham's creative problem-solving during the recording sessions, where he was constantly looking for unique ways to achieve the exact sounds he heard in his head. The chair percussion became an integral part of Secondhand News, adding a subtle but essential percussive element that gave the track its lively, organic energy that couldn't have been replicated with traditional drums or percussion instruments. Buckingham would sit in his chair and rhythmically slap the seat with his hands, creating a muffled thudding sound that blended perfectly with the song's acoustic guitar foundation and helped drive the track forward. This unusual percussion technique was just one example of Fleetwood Mac's willingness to experiment with whatever was available in the studio to create the perfect sound for each song, regardless of whether it was a conventional musical instrument or just a piece of furniture. The band was known for their innovative approach to recording during the Rumors sessions, often incorporating everyday objects and unconventional methods to achieve their artistic vision. The chair percussion worked so well for Secondhand News that it became a permanent part of the song's arrangement, and the technique demonstrates how creative musicians can find musical potential in the most ordinary objects when they're focused on serving the song rather than following traditional recording practices. The rhythmic chair slapping helped give second-hand news its intimate, homemade quality that made it stand out from the more polished productions that were typical of mid-70s rock albums. Buckingham's chair percussion also reflects the band's broader experimental approach during the Rumours recording process, where they were constantly pushing boundaries and trying new techniques to create sounds that would capture the complex emotions they were experiencing during one of the most turbulent periods in their personal and professional lives. Fact 15. Mick Fleetwood's dyslexia created unique drumming. Mick Fleetwood credits his dyslexia for creating the unusual and seemingly impossible to replicate drum pattern on "Go Your Own Way" that has baffled professional drummers for decades, making it one of the most distinctive and challenging drum parts in rock music. Fleetwood's learning disability, which affects how the brain processes written and spoken language, apparently influenced the way he approached rhythm and timing in a manner that defied conventional drumming logic. The drum pattern on "Go Your Own Way" is so unconventional that other skilled drummers have struggled to understand and recreate it, with many finding it nearly impossible to play correctly despite repeated attempts. When Boz Scaggs served as the opening act for Fleetwood Mac on tour, his drummer Jeff Porcaro spent multiple nights standing in the wings trying to figure out exactly how Fleetwood was creating the complex rhythms, becoming increasingly frustrated by his inability to decode the pattern. After several failed attempts to understand the drumming technique, Porcaro finally approached Fleetwood directly after a show and asked him to explain the secret behind his unusual playing style. To Porcaro's amazement, Fleetwood himself couldn't explain exactly how he created the rhythm, admitting that he didn't really know the technical details of what he was doing or why it worked the way it did. Fleetwood later revealed that it was only when he told Porcaro about his dyslexia that the other drummer finally understood why the pattern was so difficult to analyze and replicate. The learning disability apparently caused Fleetwood to process rhythm and timing in a fundamentally different way than most drummers, creating patterns that didn't follow traditional musical logic or structure. This neurological difference turned what could have been a limitation into a unique creative advantage, allowing Fleetwood to develop a drumming style that was entirely his own and couldn't be easily copied by other musicians who approached rhythm in more conventional ways. The "Go Your Own Way" drum pattern became one of the most recognizable and celebrated aspects of the song, proving that sometimes the most interesting musical innovations come from thinking differently rather than following established rules and techniques.